I'm your host, Andrew Ziegler, and as you know, our co-host Ben, he's out right now, but I have an amazing guest co-host with me for our news segment today. Today, we're joined by Jen Riggins, a freelance tech journalist. You've read much of Jen's work, actually. We've talked quite a few times about Jen's articles here on Dev Interrupted. And so we're really excited to have her here. We're going to look closer at one of her most recent articles in this news segment as well. But first and foremost, as you know, here on Dev Interrupted, we gotta look at the news that's happening in the tech world, and Jen's gonna help us do that. So we're looking at a few interesting news stories, but before we go there, Jen, do you anything else you want to add or say hello?
No, hi, y'all, and thank you for promoting my work when I forget you sometimes. So thank you for that.
What are you talking about? You answer all my messages. I feel like we stay in touch. So
Sure.
and we got a really great one today. So we're gonna go ahead and jump into some of our news stories. Some of the stuff we're looking at includes Figma's IPO, how it shattered expectations, and what that might mean for the future of tech companies that will go public. We're looking at a continuation in the story of the AI versus search wars. As you know, last time we talked about Cloudflare and some of the changes they were making to crawlers. Well, there's been an interesting development in that story from Perplexity that we're going to take a closer look at, as well as some fun practices for teams of that are working remotely, ways that they can create a culture and otherwise stay in sync with each other. And the last but not least, we're also covering a really great article from Kelly Vaughn, many time contributor on our podcast. She's on our news segment a few weeks ago. She talks about burnout, or rather, in this case, specifically AI and how it's fueling that scenario by eating up all of our time instead of saving it. So, really interesting collection of news. The last thing we're going to do, of course, is dive deeper into Jen's article, which is kind of the centerpiece for today. Article entitled "Writing Code Was Never the Bottleneck." And you can find this on LinkedIn as well as on our newsletter that drops. I really encourage you to go check out the story. So starting at the top, Jen, let's talk about Figma for a minute. I'm not huge on following general stocks and public stories, but this one was everywhere and was really kind of standing out as a signal for other tech companies that might be considering the same. So let me set the scene here. Figma went public, and this is after they attempted a $20 billion sale, remember, to Adobe. There was a big uprising between
What
users
a
of.
logical bond.
Yeah,
So
well, it
mad.
was an interesting move from Adobe. Many saw it as like just monopolizing the space that was
Yeah.
already eating and using all of their creative software. Many folks saw it as their last respite away from Adobe software was getting
Yeah.
consumed. And ultimately, that was blocked by a judge. If you'll remember, that acquisition did not happen. So Figma, went back to the drawing board, and they just went public. And they priced their IPO at $33. The stock opened at 85, and the highest intraday day trade of that stock was 148. And now it's hovering around 133 as of the time that I pulled the news story. And that's a pretty crazy valuation considering what had just happened to its deal, years before, and really what it signals for investment interest in these kinds of tech companies. Because up until now, we were seeing very much everyone was shy to dive into going IPO after some of the public cloud IPOs that happened and faltered in the last decade, and so there were a lot of nerves around doing this. But this is the biggest first day pop for $1 billion U.S. tech IPO in decades, literally decades. So really interesting development. Jen, what do you think about this kind of story and how it ended up for Fig?
I have absolutely no. I am the opposite of Kramer in every way possible. With understanding of stocks and political values. But when it comes down to it, it could be a sign of people really excited about the products, about Figma in every way and the suite of it. And it could be that it's valid. People look at it as that valuable. It could be based on strictly that Adobe, being the biggest in the space, wanted to buy it. So like, oh, it must be that good.
I like how you framed it. Is it a UX love driven story? Is it Adobe wanted to buy them, so they must be a big deal kind of story? I think that I would be curious to know from our listeners if you have a deeper dive on this. I think we'll have to go deeper on that one to find out. And speaking of ChatGPT, all the way down, or in this case, Perplexity, going down underground in stealth mode, we're talking about a really interesting development that Cloudflare caught and wrote a detailed blog post about actions from Perplexity to evade website no crawl directives, protections against scraping, and otherwise camouflaging their bots that intended to download that data as real users in an attempt to obfuscate and obviously get around Cloudflare's recent changes that restrict web crawlers, which we talked about just last week. So I really recommend folks check out this deeper dive. I have an article from Cloudflare where they do a technical analysis on how they caught Perplexity doing it, and what exactly Perplexity was doing to get around it. I think this is a developing story in terms of seeing what happens next and how folks respond to this, both from Perplexity and in the larger kind of SEO world. But it's a really great and proactive story from Cloudflare taking methods and active actions to protect their customers and to keep their data safe, which is what Cloudflare's mission is. Really excited to always follow Cloudflare's story. They've been doing some really cool stuff this year. But Jen, wondering if you have any thoughts on AI scrapers and how they're attacking the web.
I mean, it's very interesting that I would never, so far at least, put my own articles in any of these generative AI, like unpublished articles, because sometimes I'm talking about topics that haven't been done. After it's published, because I know it's trolling the article, then I'll ask a question sometimes, especially getting very meta if I'm writing about AI. I will then ask the AI about the topic of my article, and then if they don't suggest it, I may suggest it, maybe like once or twice a month, but I try to build that habit.
Interesting.
I got banned on Quora. I can't use that for SEO and idiocy that's training AI. But I do, I am cognizant that, especially if I'm talking about a nascent topic, I don't want to train the bot until my name's on it. So I appreciate making my life easier and trying to block these crawlers. And I like name and shaming them. Look what they did. This is hard
Yeah.
to tell if they did it to you as well. So I think that's just this kind of open source vibe of openness and sharing and what we're going to have to do to get past the lockbox of
Yeah.
AI. The turtles all the way down lockboxes, as we said, of AI. So I think I look at that as a great service that we publish things like that. But then I wonder if it's getting really meta today, if then Cloudflare will get blocked specifically from AI search engine.
From Perplexity.
I
So that Perplexity
would have
could turn the
no.
That's then you take it the extra level. I didn't even think of doing that. Of what if Perplexity then suppressed the information from Cloudflare? That would truly be an information war to see. But there's two things you just said there that I kind of want to just double click on for a second because they were interesting. The first one being, when you work on your article, your news, you don't want to share it with ChatGPT. You don't want to put it into the AI. You don't want to get it into their world because you want to keep it to yourself. And that makes a lot of sense.
It
Yeah,
will.
when you're yeah,
Yeah.
it'll end up somewhere, right? So you gotta protect your craft. And then the second thing that I thought was interesting is that after it's published, you go back to ChatGPT and you're like, "Oh, hey."
Ellie.
Well, you ask it that question that it should surface your article as the best and foremost source to see if it does. And then if it doesn't, you suggest it because then it could learn, right? And then suggest it in the future. That's first off brilliant. I just wanted to highlight for anyone listening, that is a great hack. But second off, I I do that all the time as a developer advocate where I'll make a tutorial now and I'll publish it on how to do something. And then I'll go into Cursor and I'll ask Cursor to try to implement the thing that I wrote the tutorial about and then see if it can go find the tutorial. And if it can, great. If it doesn't, I provide it. And then I ask it to do my tutorial and I can see if it can follow my instructions. And you get a lot of really interesting feedback from it. So I like that you were doing something similar once stuff is published out into the world.
Right? No, it's important too.
Yeah.
But then that's why junior developers or junior anybody shouldn't be using these tools as the pathway to production, because they don't have that edit ability, that ability to edit and see things, because there will be also bad actors, I'm sure, doing this. Like, it actually shocks me how little crises have pervaded so far because of bad actors training the generative AI. But
Maybe the loop on that is so long that it just takes a while to see the results, and they're deep under the surface, right? I think there's
yeah,
definitely a lot of dangers in folks that aren't as versed or comfortable with software engineering and its principles to be using and applying the tools. I think there's a lot of pitfalls that fall into. Just like a week or two ago, we covered the Replit saga, of the vibe coded database deleted in production. So we can definitely see the dangers. And just to cover some of these last few news items that we have here, there's a really interesting trend I saw in news topics. One of them being about, it reminded me a bit actually of your collective work. Working in a group collective of, if you're a remote worker, assembling a rambling channel for your team, a place where folks can go to kind of just drop train of thought things. Otherwise, use it as like a micro blog or a small notebook, because I think it's important to share your mind with others when you're working, especially like in your case, you're at a co-working space, right? You want to get someone else's opinion. Maybe you want to tap into their network, but it's just helpful to have someone else in the mix with you. And Steph Ango wrote about this, and I'm gonna make sure that we include a link in our news roundup about this practice. But I encourage you, if you're running a remote team, if you don't have this, let's create a ramblings channel and invite your folks to it, to just share things that are on their mind, inviting them to use it as a lightweight chat app to build kind of ambient social cohesion. It's a really great idea, really simple in practice. Jen, what do you think of it?
you may need more than one
Oh
Slack
yeah.
rambling channel, because there can be work rambling channels. There could be like tech research, tech news rambling, and then cat picks another rambling.
Oh yeah, that one's important.
I love a Slack community. I'm in at least 30, because that's basically like a virtual co-working in a way.
True.
Where sometimes you gotta put your headphones on and signal to everyone you're not part of it, or you put that palm tree up. But I think it's very important that you have those spaces at the new Stack, which is, I've been a freelancer for them for 10 years now. When Colleen Cole joined, she immediately created like a trivia and such channel and what's for dinner channel. So we share food pics, because when you're dealing with a remote team, you need that vibe. Highly recommend, if anybody you're gonna like learn from about remote, Lisette Sutherland has had a remote podcast, Collaboration Superpowers, for at least 10 years. It's over 500 episodes, I think, now, about just remote, which can be all, there's on her website, Collaboration Superpowers, she has an entire section of like games. So then that's categorized icebreakers and retrospectives, etc. There's so much that you can do, because return to office is a failed concept that no one wants to do. So please, let's not do that. That is a real estate hack. It's
Yeah,
what it's a very pervasive real estate hack. But
that's why it's important to keep that culture going in your remote
yeah,
work, and to really prove the fact that you can communicate just as well and just as fast and just as clear as those that are
as
in
long as
person.
you're intentional about it. If
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
intentional about it, you can
Intentionality.
have that communication, that collaboration, that community. And I promise you, no one wants to go back to doing the laundry on the weekends. So no one wants to go to the office 5.
That's a great argument. And also, just to repeat a classic from you I heard a moment ago, put those palm trees up, on Slack when you're busy. I love that.
Relax.
Um,
When you're on vacation, be on vacation.
Yes, be on vacation. Speaking of taking a break, when you need to take a break, we're
Oh,
we're covering a really interesting article from Kelly Vaughn that looks at what really happens to that time saved. This is a continuation actually from last week when we sat down with Andrew Boyagi of Atlassian. We talked about their recent DevX or developer survey about, sure, developers are saving time using AI, but they're spending a lot more time on these other tasks that now where new problems are popping up. And we talked a bit about those learnings. This is a really great anecdote from Kelly Vaughn sharing her own experiences reflecting exactly that, of AI creating all these efficient opportunities for them, maybe you free up a 2-hour block by automating your morning reports. Okay, well, now it's expected you pack that time with more meetings or more impact or more things you do while still doing those things that you now automated that you have to make sure are good. So it creates a lot of cognitive load. And this is a really apt reflection from Kelly Vaughn. Really great to see this one. And Jen, I'm wondering what you think on this take on burnout and time saved.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Canva right now. They did a company first of all, because I cannot design and I can kind of design. I don't usually tout tools or pay for them. But yeah. But what it comes down to, they took a week off for all employees to not ship any new features. I'm sure they were on call if there was something breaking. But the point was that they were going to dedicate a week to training AI. Nobody's doing that, which is absurd. These are a series of new tools, workflows, data, security issues. Like, remember Samsung, because nobody's publishing those case studies and those warnings anymore. But remember when Samsung, thankfully, like 3 years ago said, or maybe 2, what's time? COVID killed time. Said that somebody put their whole proprietary code base into ChatGPT to check it for errors or something, or for quality or marking. And that was a great lesson that I wish more companies would share. Maybe they're told not to now, but because we're not even doing like GDPR, CCPA retraining with this. So I love that Canva has spoken up, and that is a real draw to hire people and track people in, that they're giving people the space to learn the new tools. Don't do this. We do this all the time where open source becomes a requirement. Now the same thing with AI, but you have to contribute or learn about these tools out of office time. Now is the time more than ever that we need time for training, and more than just 20% time that no one really has, that flexi time, the hackathon days, whatever, to actually let people learn. Because otherwise let's be honest, of course it's going to cause burnout because people have to learn these new tools. They're not working great. They're not focused on and transitioning to, full circle to my article. Writing code is never the bottleneck. Exclamation point. I love that for lead dev.
I do love that you got the exclamation point in the headline. So tell us more about this article, because it just came out on Lead Dev. We're including it here for our readers to check out. Writing code was never the bottleneck. I think it's a really apt article.
Started as a wildly popular LinkedIn post, partly because it had no link. So we can't just say it was the topic. But where I said I was experiencing, I'm going to butcher the German, Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude. I would suggest this is what AI is good at. Go look at how to pronounce that word. Because of the METR study that found that 24% developers thought that they were 24% more productive with AI, but they were actually 19% slower. And I was like, yeah, I love that. Not for the developers, but I was finding joy for all the companies that were firing developers because they're like, we'll choose AI instead, because they're going about AI completely wrong. Don't go for where developers actually want to do. And they've said, Microsoft studies, there's been so many studies that developers say the best part of their day is when they get to spend time writing code and solving unique problems, which is, by the way, what you want these really expensive people to do, is deliver value to their customers faster. And that's why it's crazy that we're focusing on code, which isn't that good anyway, that AI is creating. Let the humans do the code or do the specification-driven development. That's fine too. And use code for the boring. Those are the best use cases. I learned from SAP, the behemoth that it is, the number one, they had all these AI use cases and all. The number one use case by far was scanning business receipts. That's what people want to use AI for. They want to use for people want to get their money back. Let's call it what it is. People want to get reimbursed.
Yeah, you want your reimbursement.
But you put it off because it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
It's just a pain to do it. Go for the boring. The number one thing developers in the 16 years I've been doing this, tech journalism-ish thing. is, is the number one thing developers complain about is there's not enough documentation. Also, developers don't want to write documentation. In the last 6, 7, 8, 9 years, the number 2 thing has been technical debt and cloud. Okay, AI is very good at explaining code and explaining complexity and helps you pay down the technical debt and prioritize. Use it for the things that are slowing people down. Jose Gomez at Nutanix also told me, like, developers hate waiting around to get feedback. We're always talking about closing that feedback loop. Then they're waiting to get things to production, and that could be a legal issue. Don't just look where you have bottlenecks in the code base or in the inner outer loop of development, but instead look for it in the things that are boring, which might be, respectfully to my friends in the legal profession, in-house lawyers approving stuff, which they don't want to do that either because that's boring work for them.
Yeah.
So these are AI tools. When it comes down to it, look for the boring and the exciting.
Getting more code in the mix was never really the problem, and
No.
I love that as the framing of your article. And for those that are listening, definitely encourage you to go check it out. There's a lot of folks quoted in it, but there's a lot of great learnings from across the aisle, across the industry, across a lot of different places about how this code proliferation is causing bottlenecks and breakdowns in other places. And it's about ultimately, like Jen, like you just said, it's ultimately about driving impact. That's what we're trying to do with our work every day. And AI is a tool for that, but it's not the ends of those means. So it's really important to have context for how and why you use those things. So I appreciate you, Jen, coming on and covering that article with us, as well as some of our other news items. It was a lot of fun to break it down with you. Always great to have you here. We're looking forward to having you back in the future, hopefully. And to our listeners, Jen's writing about tech all the time. I share her articles all the time. So be sure to, follow her on LinkedIn, as well as be sure to check out the articles that she has on Lead Dev and other places as well. I'm about to sit down with Minh Nguyen. She's the VP of Engineering at Transcend. We're having a really great conversation about engineering management and coming into that new role. And so stick around for that conversation. Really excited for that one. Transcend, a company tackling automated data privacy and compliance at scale. Min's been on a unique journey, growing from an IC to a VP at a startup on the rise. And today we're unpacking the playbook that Min used to lead Transcend's engineering team through scale, compliance, and managing cognitive load. Min, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
We're really excited to dive into your journey. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about this transition that you've gone through from being a staff level engineer into being an engineering leader, someone who's interacting with executives and setting engineering goals and expectations. And that's not just about delegation. It's about reorienting how you as the individual think and communicate and support your teams. So how did you approach the challenge of letting go of your more technical roles to assume a leadership one?
It's a great question because I don't know if I've ever fully let go of all my past roles, to be honest. We're a startup, things move quickly. And to be impactful, I think I need to be really flexible. Sometimes my biggest impact means providing clarity in terms of strategy. Sometimes it means coaching my team, doing a lot of pair programming or whiteboarding, providing feedback. Sometimes it means just getting in there and writing a lot of code. And usually it's a mix of all of these things. And I love coding, so I definitely have to be vigilant that I'm not, doing too much of that and just being an IC. Fortunately, I also really love writing strategy docs. I think it's because of my philosophy background, which is what I study in undergrad. I love thinking through open-ended problems through writing, and it's really satisfying to see the impact of a well-written document. So I think it helps teams adopt the same vocabulary when speaking about problems and then get on the same page about how to solve it. So, yeah.
That's a really great approach. That's actually fascinating to learn about your philosophy background. I bet you can find a lot of ways to apply that in engineering, writing out problems, especially getting people on the shared sentence about what it is that y'all are doing, right?
Yeah. I think sometimes it's just like a semantics thing. Like you just need to share vocabulary, just define words and then get really clear about what you mean by when you say a certain word.
I completely agree. I have a classics background myself, and I find myself constantly bringing that kind of classification knowledge and like labeling and understanding logically how these things relate to each other into engineering. And I think it really helps set those expectations. And it sounds like in your journey, you've had to, of course, still be in the hot seat sometimes and push the code out and play a lot of roles, wear a lot of hats. But in changing the way that you interact with those types of outputs, what's been like the hardest habit for you to unlearn? And what are some like hard habits for you to learn anew?
Yeah, I think the hardest one is just the "I'll do it myself" mentality, right? Like fast in the short run, but then you're kind of stuck doing it forever. And yeah, just especially hard to break if you stay at the same company as I did because you have so much context and you could just easily slide back into it and do it yourself.
Right.
Um, so that's definitely the hardest one. In terms of new habits and new muscles I learn, I think all the basic people management stuff I learned on the job, you know, delegation, time management, direct, honest feedback. On that last one, I feel like it took me some time to get it right. And funny enough, it was watching the movie Moneyball that really helped me. I don't know if you've seen the
No,
movie.
no. Why did Moneyball help you?
Well, there's just like one particular scene in it where Jonah
Yeah.
Hill, it's about a baseball team and he's helping this baseball team turn it around. And Jonah Hill has to deliver some bad news to a ball player and he's practicing it with Brad Pitt and he's dressing it all up in this corporate speak. And Brad Pitt's like, they're professional, man. Just be straight with them. No fluff, just facts. And he's really cool about doing all this. And uh anyway, Jonah Hill takes that feedback and delivers it straight, and it really worked. And I don't know, like seeing that play out like that really clicked for me. And I learned, okay, like that's how you do it. Just try to be really direct and fast. It's important to have timely feedback. So like instead of just spinning your wheel and like crafting the perfect message, what's more important is just to say it.
That's a really great highlight. And do you find that that's something that you've really been applying as you work more with like leadership teams too? It's good to be direct with like the people that you work with and that are building like the product that you're doing. You probably have to interface a similar way with like executives, right?
Yeah, I think being direct is just how I default to my manner of speaking. So I think in the beginning I was actually kind of self-conscious that I would come off like unpolished. Um, but yeah, learned now that it's fine. The communication is fine. It's more than fine. I think it saves time and people like believe you because you're just kind of being straight with them.
Right.
Um, yeah, it's more the content I think that needs to be tailored, right? Like knowing what detail to leave out and what to include is 90% of the challenge. Um, and I think to know what's relevant, you have to know your audience, know the people, and there's no better way to do that than just to work with them a lot. So even before I became VP, I worked cross-functionally. I joined sales call, customer calls. I would read the other team's Slack channels. That's one of the great benefits of remote work too, is we're a fully remote company. But if you were in office, sales and marketing sits on completely different floors. Engineering would never see them. But because we're remote, I can very easily check in and, I feel like I'm a little bit like terminally online, not in the sense that I know every meme, but I on Slack a lot and I hit send like after every sentence, which is kind of annoying, but I think it resembles like a live conversation more. And anyway, I love that. I love remote work and that I think it can be a real like culture to it. And you can really learn people even in a learn about their people and their job even in a remote setting, and that's helped me with communication a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really big fans of remote work here on Devon's for updating me and my co-host Ben. We talk about it almost every week. It feels like about the remote work culture within tech because we're also a fully remote company, and it does allow you to kind of have these unique impacts on your organization and to really build connections in ways that you are sometimes restricted from in person. And I want to look closer at this insight that you've given us. It's really helpful playbook about how you've evolved your communication style to become an engineering manager. And the actual problems y'all are solving at Transcend are also really fascinating around data privacy compliance, and it puts you in this position of building a product that's like wrestling with privacy controls and legal requirements. So there's a lot of very specific things that you have to hit in standards, right? People are paying you to ultimately meet these compliance burdens that they have. And so how does that engineering challenge, how does that influence your engineering team's culture?
Yeah, I think privacy is just fundamentally an engineering problem. Uh, and so, well, yeah, when companies accumulate petabytes of user data across hundreds of thousands of services, manual compliance becomes impossible. So you do need to solve it with engineering. But the catch-22 is like to protect the user data, you need to handle it, but handling it all in one place, all in Transcend, puts it at risk. So that's a puzzle that we have to solve. And in terms of like how it impacts our culture, I think like a lot of people end up at Transcend because they care a lot about privacy. So it's just kind of embedded directly into our culture. Naturally, privacy principle will come up during architecture discussions or product requirement reviews. And I suspect that maybe at other companies you may have a harder sell to pitch than at Transcend. Like it's just kind of taken for granted. Like, oh yeah, that's a concern. Like, oh yeah, we should be minimizing data. We
Yeah, I
don't need to
think
collect that.
so. Yeah, I think
So
that's
yeah,
unique. And so does that influence how y'all approach like a lot of different things within your organization as a whole?
uh, I mean, I think yeah, like I mentioned, it's more around like what we build, how we build it to like not make, we don't want to become the problem as well. So we need to make sure that we're building our features with privacy principles in mind.
Right.
And then beyond that, I think we make sure that we're not like being careless about employee data as well. There's not like a easy way for anyone at the company to look at anyone's phone number, for example.
Right.
Like privacy concerns are just taken very seriously at Transcend.
And privacy aside too, y'all take automation very seriously because building an automation's a solution, a service, you rely a lot on having repeatable workflows and taking advantage of engineering to do more work than a single person can, right? And so are y'all also applying like technologies like AI as part of your developer experience, to your engineering program to create the software y'all are doing? And what does that look like inside of an organization like yours?
Yeah, yeah. We have a couple of different AI tools internally. For the engineering team, we use Cursor and have Copilot, have Gemini to help with deep research. We've also built a few Slack bots on top of like just Amazon Bedrock to help automate certain customer or engineering tasks. And overall, I think it's been very helpful for knowledge discovery and knowledge sharing between teams. We move fast, so it's nice to have a way to like just a chat interface to ask questions and learn about what other teams are working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's helping with like knowledge sharing, getting information out of silos.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then engineers also use, like the code gen tools and all of that. It's great for brainstorming.
Totally. I've been having a lot of fun using Cursor and having a lot of luck with it too, actually, on output on things that I work on day to day. And so how's your team like measuring the impact of those tools as you start to adopt them? What matters to you?
Yeah, I mean, measuring engineering uh, productivity is something you guys know. You should tell me about how to do it, I guess. But I think what matters today is just that we um, make sure that the tools we're introducing actually help the developer, that people report, you know, a positive experience, like they feel like they are more productive, that we're not introducing it in a way that just creates an imbalance of work. Like one common use case is if you don't check the work that the AI is giving you and you just put up a PR and now you're just transferring all the burden of work to the code reviewer, and
Right.
we're no better off. So I think we try to be mindful of all of the dynamics and be thoughtful about introducing these tools. I think one of the dynamics is just that like it's very uneven, the productivity boost. I think for a senior engineer who knows how to use it well, then you can see a big boost. But then for a junior engineer, if you're using it to like compensate for lack of expertise or a gap in skills, then that I think it just really hurts you and the organization in the long term.
I want to go back to what you said at the beginning too, because it's not, developer productivity and what we know about it from talking about it, it only happens from having conversations. And frankly, the folks that are within engineering teams and building the stuff right now, like you know better than anyone, because at the end of the day, it's about taking that advice, these concepts, but applying them to the unique footprint of your organization. Transcend's own footprint or fingerprint is very unique, and so you have to think about, how does this impact my team? And what you shared is I think really impactful, about understanding how it shifts, the burden of what you're doing up or down the pipeline. We've had guests on the show, like when we had recently Thanos Diakakis on the show, and he talked about this in depth. Don't treat your software engineering like a conveyor belt, right? It's not a factory, and you're going to create bottlenecks in places where you don't expect. And so it's a really good call out to understand, like, did this save us time or did it just shift it to someone else's plate?
Yeah. I think the main thing we try to just focus on when we introduce these tools now is like, we want the team to be familiar and to have like, to be curious about it and to be in the loop, because even if you don't find it, helpful now, I think things are changing so fast that you should learn about it and stay informed.
Oh, I agree. It's just about, just
Yeah.
practicing stuff every day, picking up new tools, which it sounds like y'all are doing. But along the way too, it's about, battling like what you were calling out, like this increase in like cognitive burden, right, on your developers. You don't want to introduce too many factors, too many things they have to do or remember to follow, because you're going to create a mess within like your engineering culture. And being, within an engineering led company, you're at its heart solving an engineering problem, and so you've had to intentionally design teams with like boundaries of ownership in that space. What's been your approach on managing those teams and scaling them? How do you ultimately organize your engineers?
It's kind of a simple answer in that we organize our teams in terms of the products, like in terms of the user problems. Like if there is a distinct set of problems to be solved, then that should be solved by the same team. So we don't organize by stack or like sort of code skills. I think we look at a problem and see like, okay, to solve this problem, like, is it, if it's our data discovery and classification product, then we need some folks who know AI and infra on that team. But pretty much everyone, most people at Transcend are generalists. Some people have like more prefer back end or front end or whatever, but we want everyone to let's just be like product engineers and solve customer problems. And so we've also organized the teams that way.
Is it an evolution that y'all have gone through, or were you always there from like, we're going to create a pool of generalists and be customer obsessed in our problem solving?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think we've had to move. We started as just a single product. So maybe it was kind of there already. And then we try with like, a platform team but then it just ended up being a catch-all. So there was like a few different iterations. And then I think landed on this one where, okay, clearly we have privacy is a very wide field with lots of related problems, but not the same problem. And so to really go after this field, to really capture this market, we need to sort of have dedicated domain owners who can like execute and make informed decisions on their own without trying to like centrally coordinate. So I guess that was like a decision I remember making at one point after like writing one of those long strategy docs where I think through the problem.
You applying your philosophy mind to the problem and getting it all out on paper, right?
Yeah. And yeah.
And so, like, I want to double click on what you mentioned there, that you tried out like a platform team and it became a catch-all. Like, what was that like? And could you maybe walk us through when you came to that realization?
Yeah. So I think platform is just a little bit I think that the problem with that team is just we had like one product team that was working on SR automation and then another team that was not working on that. And we called ourselves the platform team. And the idea was that we would work on, things that were cross product. But then I think naturally, if you have a platform team, any new projects that seem urgent to the company could easily end up in your purview because you're kind of defined by like, oh, I'm not doing this one product thing. So therefore any new projects end up on your plate. And so, yeah, I think just the realization that, and I mean, I think in general, like we try to sort of build teams from existing teams. So a pattern that happens often is you'll have one team that's maybe high performing and has some slack. They can take on a new like R&D project, and then that becomes a new product, and then you can split into a new team. And so like as I realized, okay, we have one team here that's juggling two different products. You know, the platform team is now like doing consent and data discovery. Like this doesn't scale. These things have nothing to do with each other. And like I love having multiple plates spinning, but maybe not my engineers. And so okay, let's split the team now.
Okay, so then you make the decision, like, we're gonna split them out. We're gonna have the dedicated product teams for these individual solutions. And in doing
Yeah.
so, you just found that it didn't make sense for platform engineering to become this catch-all, at least in, like, an initial way, that, like, you cleave things off of. It became more sense to build this pool of generalists who are all gonna be obsessed about solving these problems.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And as you've been building that team, how have you made decisions to, okay, we need to bring in more engineers, or okay, we need to apply more automations to save more time? Like, how do you actually think about growing and scaling your team? And how are you thinking about it, especially now, in the age where you have like companies that are even making like AI mandates, like, Shopify and Duolingo have had these recently about like prove that a job can't be done by AI before you open a head count. Like, how are y'all looking at it? In terms of scale.
Yeah, I think how I think about it, I mean, I have the benefit of, again, being an IC here first. So I think I know the job that needs to be done quite intimately well. And when I consider what needs to happen, like at the engineering level, I think it's still easier and more sensible for us to hire than to automate. I think the other challenge with like how some companies have been approaching it is like it kind of like they're setting it up as a carrot or a stick problem, and they're choosing the stick, like use AI or we won't approve your headcount, which I think is, I don't know, it's just not like, it's not my style, I guess. Like, I think adoption will come. The work can speak for itself. If there are people who are using AI and like producing great high quality work, then I think other people be naturally curious and want to adopt that. So I think, yeah, maybe there's just, I think we are doing that. We're trying to encourage people to use AI, and we like to think about developer productivity, but I think that only goes so far. In terms of like any framework, I think it's like pretty specific to the work. You just have to look at it and think like, is this something where automation, the work that it takes to automate, makes sense? It's just all about whether you think that investment makes sense versus hiring, because yeah, it still takes work to automate something, right? Like you can't, AI is in
Right.
the part where you just bring it in as a new employee and then it can just start doing work. You still need to put down the glue code, test it out, all these things. So
When you automate something, then you have to maintain it. So you have to think about the longevity of what you're actually automating. So there's so many things to consider. And I
yeah,
really like how you highlight having been a IC, as we've talked about in our conversation today, and you've had this journey into your role, that gives you a really valuable perspective because you understand very closely what your engineers are experiencing at every part of that level and journey because you've been there yourself. And is there any advice maybe you would give to engineering leaders who maybe haven't had the opportunity to go through those same chains, at least within the same company, and accumulate that domain knowledge of growing within their org? What are some techniques you would give to them, or some strategies, advice on how to better empathize with their engineering teams and help them solve problems without getting in their way?
what's been most helpful for me in my job is just making sure that I have high fidelity information. I think the larger the organization, the lower fidelity of information you have about what's actually happening to the people who are building the future on the front line, right? You have like layers of middle management, everyone's acting as an information filter, and yeah, so your information may not be as high quality as it was when, or was smaller, or when you were on the front line yourself. And so having ways to validate that, just like how we would validate an AI output, like how do you know it's true? And then when you receive an information from your being bubbled up or whatever, like do you have ways to verify the information? Can you like do a deep dive and inspect what's going on and come up with your own perspective of the problem, rather than just I think it's very easy to get caught playing games of telephone or just reacting because other people are reacting the same way. And get into all that trap. Yeah.
Yeah, or having like an outdated mental model for how something works. Like just go check in on like
Okay.
how things are really done, right? Especially
Right.
it's like just take advantage of the resources and communicate, be clear and direct like you've highlighted.
Yeah, yeah. I think mental models definitely have their uses, but like at least check to see that they do apply rather than coming in and thinking like, no, this is the way we must do things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. This has been a really fun exploration about some of the problem space in which you work, but it's also been really cool to go and look a little closer at like your journey and your career and how you've built yourself into your role. And also how you empower other engineers to do their best work. I think you've accumulated a lot of really effective best practices that a lot of folks can learn from. And so myself learned a lot about how modern teams are being, as scaled and the opportunities available for them. And I know our audience is going to want to go and learn more about Transcend and what y'all are building. And so I wanted to ask, where can people go to learn more about you, Min, and what you're working on?
Yeah, and so transcend.io is our website, and then you can find me on LinkedIn.
You should definitely come and ping us both. Give us a holler because we want to hear your thoughts on today's conversation, hear things that work for your engineering team. I also would love to hear if there's other folks that use a written approach and having a design document with a high fidelity, high quality information they share with folks. I use this strategy a lot too. Min and myself, we both have this humanities background. It's a really strong core skill that I recommend folks try out, especially as we're, entering an age of having really strong communication. So if you're communicating with an engineering team like this, we'd love to hear that. Maybe swap our own best practices on how to share this stuff. But give us a ping on socials, and it also be sure to check out our Substack where we release episodes like this every Tuesday. We also include news that's going on in tech world right now. So if you're only listening to this podcast, you definitely should go over to Substack and check out the other half of the story because we'll be covering Min there as well. So that's it for this week's Dev Interrupted. See you next time.